Welcome, everybody, to Come Back to Love Radio. I'm Robyn Vogel, and we are on Dream Vision 7. Welcome to our new listeners. Glad you're here. Welcome to those that have been listening every week. Also, glad you're here. This is the radio show where we explore the journeys of healing, connection, and transformation in love and relationships. I'm your host, Robyn Vogel. I'm a love and intimacy coach, an internal family systems therapist, and the creator of Heal Your Heart. Join me as I share stories, tools, and insights to help you rewrite your love story, whether it's about overcoming heartbreak, unraveling old patterns, or reigniting the spark in your current relationship. Together, we'll explore how love begins within and expands outward to create meaningful, fulfilling connections with others and with yourself. You can tune in to Come Back to Love every Thursday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern on Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Listen online or on your mobile device, in your car, or simply ask Alexa to play Dream Vision 7. In each episode, I welcome incredible guests who bring their unique perspectives and expertise to help us dive into topics like self-love, self-compassion, healing childhood wounds, and creating the love we desire and deserve. Today, I am so happy to be joined by a special guest, Sasha Cagen. She is a life and executive coach with over 13 years of experience guiding professional women towards greater confidence, self-empowerment, and clarity. Specializing in women 40 and older, Sasha helps her clients with a somatic, body-centered transformation approach, helping them to reconnect with their life force energy, or what she calls, quote, pussy power. She guides clients towards achieving their goals, whether they want increased confidence at work or a more adventurous life or a better sex life. I'm going to say, and a better sex life. In addition, in addition,
Yes.
yeah, in addition to being a seasoned coach, Sasha is also a tango dancer, a world traveler, a writer. We're going to talk about your writing. The creator of Pussywalking, a mindfulness practice designed to help women tap into their sexual energy, boosting their charisma and empowerment. Pussywalking grew out of an extensive study of Argentinian tango, which she's been doing since 2010. Sasha is also the author of Quirkyalone, which we are also going to talk about, and a book called To-Do List: From Buying Milk to Finding a Soulmate, What Our Lists Reveal About Us. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to talk about all these things. She's got an upcoming memoir called Wet, which tells the story of healing from past sexual trauma through a sensual journey in South America. So hold on to your seats, grab a cup of tea or coffee, settle in, and join us for this heart-centered transformational conversation. Let's explore how you can come back to love, starting with the relationship that matters the most, the one with yourself. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to everybody. Let's dive in. My goodness, I don't even know where to start.
Thank you, Robyn. That was so cool to listen to. And I want to say that I focus in my work about the quote unquote pussy and sexual energy, but heart energy is also really important in my writing and my coaching. And so as I listen to you describe the most important relationship being the one we have with ourselves and how that love beams outward, I'm so happy to be here. We're here with you to talk about that because it's so the core of everything.
Exactly. Yeah, let's dive into that because we both have had these sort of parallel journeys around like self-love, self-marriage. I know you know my most recent story, which I will share in a little bit, but do you want to share your own journey with that piece, which I
Sure, this is really cool because I don't think I've ever been interviewed by someone who also married herself. And I also married myself. And in the book Quirkyalone, I've been tracking this trend of self-marriage since 2003. So I have heard many stories about women and men making vows to themselves, and I wound up doing it myself too. So yes. My first book, Quirky Alone, is very much about self-love because that book is about people who have been single longer than most other people. And people who have been single for a long time can wind up really asking themselves, is there something wrong with me? Because how come everybody else has a partner and I don't? So that book that came out in 2004 was aimed directly at that audience. And so when I was researching people in that situation, I heard stories about women marrying themselves. So I interviewed them. And,
Mm.
with self-love, I think it all makes more sense, at least for me, the older I get, because when I first heard about women marrying themselves, I was 30. I was like, oh, that's nice, but I'm not going to do
That's good.
that's good for you. I'm going to just
Go
find
away.
her and do the normal thing. And,
Right.
I'll just take that route. But then, of course, as I got older, my life didn't take a conventional path when everybody else in my social circle was finding a partner around in their 30s. It just didn't happen for me. I had relationships, I dated, but I didn't marry. And so when I got to 40, that decision to marry myself was partially about doing something to recognize myself as an adult woman and have a ceremony for myself because I didn't have one otherwise, unless I created it.
Mm.
And it was really much deeper. And it was something I didn't talk about in all the press that I wound up doing about self-marriage, because it was more of an intimate topic that I can talk about with you on a show like this, because it was about trauma healing. It was about the courage that I found in my 30s to look at a secret of childhood sexual abuse that I had been carrying since
Mm.
I was a child, very young, and all of the ways that had influenced me to believe that I wasn't lovable or worthy, or worthy enough to have problems and be loved anyway, basically. And
Yeah.
so I had been doing all this kind of really deep work around that, and the self-marriage thing felt like a creative way to recognize my own courage and loving myself through the stuff we don't want to face. I think we all have stuff that we don't want to talk about, we don't want to face, we don't want to go to therapy or coaching about. And I was doing that. And I think that is true self-love, like dealing with the stuff that's been inside and needs attention. So when I married myself, I did it in Buenos Aires. Was I living there? No, I was spending time there then. I was there for a month, and I did this ceremony in the Japanese gardens of Buenos Aires with two friends, a Colombian friend and an Estonian friend. Tango is very international. And we had this really beautiful ceremony. People can see it on my YouTube channel if they wanted. It was very
Wow.
quirky. And I was supported by my Colombian friend, who also married herself in a very spontaneous way. And that Estonian woman also has married herself now, years later. So our ranks are growing.
Wow, that's amazing. So how many years ago was that now then? Like, wow.
That was 11 years ago that I
Uh-huh.
married myself. Yeah. So I've been married for 11 years.
Uh-huh. Great. That's awesome. Yeah, it's something I've always thought about. And I was married and divorced, had kids, did a more traditional thing at first, although never was a traditional person, trying to fit myself into that box of traditional. But every time I tried to do that, I would get anxiety, like literal anxiety, like panic attacks, kind of anxiety. And I never really understood why. I was just like, why am I so anxious? And actually roll back from there, I didn't even know that it was anxiety I was feeling in my body. I remember sharing with somebody that it was hard to sort of catch my breath often. And I was young, I was like in my 20s, I guess. And somebody said, like, maybe you should go to the doctor. And I was thinking, no, it's not that, but I don't know what it is. Like, I didn't identify it as anxiety. I just could feel this contraction in my chest so often.
Mm,
Then over the years, I realized, oh, this is anxiety. This is panic. This is, because I grew up kind of a little bit or mostly on my own. Like, my mother died when I was young. My father did his best. He was amazing, but he was working and trying to take care of two kids. So, these things that like people knew and I felt like normal people knew, I didn't know, everything from like how to shop for a bra to like what is anxiety,
Mm.
because I was just like doing my best with myself and like taking library books out, and hiding under my bed to try to like learn things that I thought other people knew that I should know. Um, so where was I going with that? So I just
You
yeah,
mean you
so that was like trying to do.
at your wedding or being a mother or like all the what was making you feel anxious?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know early on, but when I did try to do these traditional things or did traditional things, I would feel anxious. So yes, that's where this was going. And
Hmm.
so I did some traditional things, and then, I stopped doing those traditional things for various reasons. And anyway, so marrying myself was something that I had always thought about doing. And then it kept sort of growing, the idea. And then a couple of years ago, it got like really big. And then, as you know, a couple of months ago, for those of you seeing the video, I married myself in Costa Rica. What's with these Latin American countries, huh?
Where we feel more free, but they can actually be quite traditional. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I put for those of you that can't see us right now, I got a tattoo of a heart on my left um, finger that's next to the pinky. Some people call it the ring finger. I've been looking at why that is called the ring finger. Um,
Can
because
we see it?
oh yeah, we can all see it
Oh yeah, there. I
in the
love it.
video.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. I'm sorry for those listening that you can't see the actual um, heart on my finger, but maybe I'll put that somewhere in a blog post so people can see it. Anyway, so yeah, for me it wasn't. It's different from you, where it sounds like you kind of created a ritual for yourself with some witnesses. I did this by myself. I had friends with me that were traveling with me, but I intentionally didn't even tell them what I was doing and
Mm.
went and got the tattoo. And it's been kind of an evolving process of committing and devoting myself to myself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's always that way. And I'll speak from the perspective of someone who's been married to myself for 11 years. This is my ring now, is this necklace.
Hmm.
So this is a stone inside that I connect with my voice and speaking. And I've had many different rings because even if I marry someone else, I'm just the kind of person who loses rings. So it's
Yeah.
like your approach because it's a tattoo. And I've been flexible with myself to have different symbols over the years. But I
Yeah.
think it's like what you said, because it's like a marriage to someone else or anything we're committed to. It's not a once and done, but it's an evolution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Somebody recently said to me, "Well, what about if you get married to someone else and you'll have a ring over the tattoo?" And I said, "Yes, but I always need to be married to myself first anyway." So
Hmm.
it'll be underneath the symbol of a commitment to someone else as the continued commitment to myself. So I'm so happy that I did that. And yes. Um, so Quirkyalone, I know it was a long time ago now, but the book is still very present, right? The language is, you're still writing about it, talking about it. People are drawn to you. It's such unique language, which is something I actually treasure and value highly. So I'm curious, and also for our listeners, like, what does quirky alone mean, and how do people sort of self-identify as quirky alone and then connect with you?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because I came up with Quirkyalone in 2000.
Mhm.
So that's 25 years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
And in fact, in the current book I'm working on, Wet, it opens with a chapter of me giving an interview on NPR and feeling totally like a fraud because I was talking about being happy single and being this role model for happy single people. And I actually wasn't happy single. Like I was desperate about finding a partner at that time in my life. So it's been interesting and challenging to be associated with this one idea for so long because it gets kind of fixed in people's heads in a way that it's more simple than what it is.
Yeah.
But the essence of it that people can identify with is not settling, really. It's not even really about preferring to be single because there are people, there are authors and sociologists, coaches who are about people who just want to be single, which is great. Like that's
Yes.
more valid and those ranks are growing right now. But
Yeah.
Quirkyalone has always been about the people who feel both the desire to have solitude, alone time, most of all to have deep relationship. And that doesn't always come around so quickly or easily in terms of romance or even friendship. I mean, these are people who value, I think, meaningful, deep connections. And so the quirky part is interesting because it's like as a human being, I feel like I need quirky. Like if I'm going to date someone, they be quirky. Like it's too otherwise. But the quirky part in Quirkyalone technically referred to you are okay going to a wedding alone. You are okay doing
Mm.
things. Even like I just had a woman come to a reading I gave in Providence and she didn't know I was going to read. She'd read Quirkyalone in high school. She had
Wow.
been inspired to go to her prom alone by the book,
Oh my
which is
God.
something I did because I didn't have a date to my prom. Well, actually, I got ghosted basically at 17 by my summer camp boyfriend who lived in New
Goodness.
Hampshire. So it was a pretty terrible thing. But yeah,
Oh.
my curriculum spirit at 17, before there was a word for it, still went with my friends. So there is this part about embracing life
Hmm.
whether you are single or in a relationship or dating. And like, let's say you don't have everything you want in your life. Let's say you dearly want a partner and you don't have it. To be quirky alone is still to live fully anyway. And to do the things you want to do, not be afraid to go out. I mean, going to a restaurant alone even can be quite confronting.
Hmm.
So it's like, yeah, do you want to live it fully, single or in a relationship? And do you not settle? That would be kind of, for me, the key questions that would say, yes, you're a quirky alone,
I
if
love
you're
that.
identify with that.
I'm definitely a quirky alone. I want you said restaurant, which I'm happy to go to a restaurant by myself, but I go to the movies by myself, which I really actually prefer. I love going by myself. It feels like this cozy, like I'm just doing exactly what I want to do for me. And I don't care if anybody else is there. And even recently, and I was quite surprised by this, a couple of my friends were surprised. Like, really? You go to the movies alone? I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, why do I need somebody sitting next to me?
Hmm.
I love going to the movies by myself.
Yeah, I do too. And yet sometimes I don't go. So there's, I think for all of us, like even for me as the creator of Quirky Alone, there's this kind of digging deep of like, oh yeah, I could do that. And it would be enjoyable.
Mhm.
And I want to say something, and I don't know if I'm going to say it in the perfect way, but you sort of brought this up with the idea when people ask you, what about when you get married, that you have this heart and then you have a ring over it? Just because you prioritize your own happiness and have these vows to yourself to make your own happiness important, it doesn't mean that you can't be flexible and also prioritize a relationship. And I'll say this specifically because I'm going to get super real here of being in the dating pool, and that there are a lot of people, men included, who have been through relationships where they lost themselves. Like this feels to me very common in my coaching practice and in people I meet in the world that they're like, oh, I wasn't really happy at the end of this marriage that lasted 20 years because I lost who I am.
Yes.
So then, as a reaction to that, it can be, I will never give up anything that makes me happy or because of this experience. And it can become quite rigid. And I'm bringing this up because it's like, I feel like it's really dynamic. Like you can prioritize your own happiness and be flexible and prioritize a relationship. So, maybe this is obvious, but I actually don't feel like it's obvious to people who are going through this whiplash of having lost themselves and then want to make themselves important to themselves again.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that a lot too and hear it a lot. In fact, I just heard it yesterday. But I think one of the things that you said is so important is our for somebody who is aware of that inside themselves, are they in a reaction to what had happened or what happened in the relationship? And now are they in relax reaction like you said whiplash. And what happens when you come back to center? Like, what do you truly want when you come back to
Mm.
center? So I think
Hmm.
it's really helpful to notice, like, oh, I'm in reaction here. I'm just like saying, I don't ever want to experience that ever again with like a big temper tantrum.
Right. I think that's an excellent way of putting it because in the center, there's flexibility. I mean, that's
Yes.
life. Even with
Yes.
our own loving relationships with ourselves, we have to be flexible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing that happens, which I'm just going to drop in here for those that are listening that have been in relationship for however long, and because I've worked with couples for so many years, 20 years or so, it and my own relationships, recognizing how there can be that polarities start to form and extremes start to form that aren't actually our true selves. All of a sudden one loves to drive fast cars and one like the other like can't
Mhm.
tolerate any fast movement in a vehicle.
Mhm.
One loves to all of a sudden travel all over the world, and the other one's like, I really feel like staying home. You know,
Mhm.
it just it it just happens because our, harmony in nature, things balance, but they also go into extremes. And yeah, it can be really tricky because neither one, I don't think, is true. I think that these are just ways that people relate and separate from each other and find it hard to come back together. So they start stepping into extreme versions of themselves. There might be some part that loves to drive fast cars, which is really fun, but not always.
Mhm.
And then you're in this extreme part version of you that isn't actually the true you in your center.
Mhm. Yeah, I really like the way you set that up because it's almost like setting up a battle of like, we opposite we occupy these poles when actually
Yes,
both people might be more flexible or,
more
not have
flexible.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I love that being flexible with ourselves. And just to bring it back to what you said, which is so important that, just because somebody who decides they're quirky alone and maybe decides to marry themselves and is firmly committed in their heart to themselves doesn't exclude anyone, from opening up to love with a partner and
Mm-hmm.
committing, devoting to the relationship, to that person, to yourself. So, yeah, yes to the flexibility.
Absolutely, because our lives are pretty long. Like we
Yeah,
go through so many different stages and we ourselves change and what we want change. And yeah, I really think what you said about reaction is the key. Like, are you putting this stake in the ground? I must do X on this day because of a reaction or because that's how you really feel it.
yes, exactly. Perfect space for commercial break. We'll be right back with some more juiciness on this topic. Welcome back to Come Back to Love Radio. I'm Robyn Vogel, your host, and I'm here today with Sasha discussing so many interesting things. We just covered Quirkyalone. If you are just tuning in and you have just heard that word for the first time, Quirkyalone, I invite you to download this episode and listen to the first part of our conversation. It's good. It's good. It's good. So, pussy walking is another. I love these words. I'll say it again. Like it's so great, and because words carry so much energy, and and images and ways that we lean in or move away, and all of that is so rich and important
Mhm.
to acknowledge. So when you say the word pussy walking, like so many things get conjured up inside me, and that's all interesting, maybe or not.
I'm
But
interested in what gets conjured up in you.
exactly.
Well, it's true. So I also love words, and I'm definitely a word person. I'm a writer, and I just love the power of words. I think even I've discovered with clients like how you write a to-do list item, the words you choose will affect how you feel about doing that task. Do you choose words that make it appealing and fun, or is it drudgerous? So Quirkyalone, Pussywalking, like, yeah, one of my passions in life is creating words. Quirkyalone, by the way, got into the dictionary. It is on dictionary.com, so that could be
No.
one of my top 10 achievements in my life.
Are you kidding? You mean I can use it in Scrabble?
Oh my, well, if dictionary.com is an accepted reference, then you can
Okay.
use it in Scrabble, and
All
we're
right.
waiting for Pussywalking to be acceptable. That would be a very long word in Scrabble,
Okay.
Pussywalking.
Yes.
You have to append pussy, probably.
Yeah.
um, to have enough letters.
Right.
So, pussy walking is very interesting for reasons that you talked about because the word causes people to lean in because it's taboo, and it causes people to run away because they're afraid of the word pussy for many different reasons. And I myself was not comfortable with the word pussy, let's say 12 years ago before I began a journey in going to
Mm.
sexuality workshops, tantra, all of these different spaces where people talk about women's bodies with more comfort and frequency.
Yes.
So,
Spaces
so
we find ourselves in, you and me. Mhm.
yeah, this is another commonality that you and I have, being interested in sexuality, sexual energy, tantra. So, even saying the word pussy can be transformative for people because, like, my mother hated it. We had a fight when I first shared pussy walking with her because she was disgusted. And
Oh.
it, it elicits this shocked response. But once she discovered what it really was and understood, now she's a great fan and she loves saying the word pussy walking. So, this is kind of the journey I hope for other people because the intention is even to be transformed by the taboo and
Mm.
to step into greater comfort of talking about our bodies and what's available to us when we tap into our own nether regions or like all parts of our body. So pussy walking is very simple. I think it's time to define it.
Yes.
It's basically becoming aware of the internal clitoris that we have inside of our bodies that encircles the vaginal canal. This is information that was suppressed in medical textbooks for centuries. Doctors and researchers would discover what was really going on in women's bodies and then ignore it and suppress that in diagrams to the point where women will have had surgeries and doctors haven't known what's really going on inside their bodies and damage them. So this is
Yeah.
by omission a great attack on women.
Mhm.
It was a woman urologist in Australia who was a pioneer and did an MRI to create 3D models of the clitoris and show us what is really going on. So, some of us have heard that that little button that we think is just the clitoris has a lot of nerve endings for pleasure. Actually, that whole structure inside also does. So, pussy walking is something that I invented because I was learning so much about my body from doing different sexual energy practices and studying tango and hanging out in South America, watching how it walked. Because I had like a long time of spending a lot of time in Brazil and Argentina.
Mm.
Um, so basically, I teach women how to pussy walk, and it's a matter of it's visualizing the anatomy that I've been talking about, breathing into it and cultivating that energy, and then letting it animate the way you walk. So what's interesting is
Mm.
it affects everyone, even men, if they learn pussy walking, because nobody really tells us to focus on that part of our body. It's something that you talk about if there's a problem with your pelvic health or your menstruation or pregnancy or painful sex or but nobody really tells you to go there just to develop that power and energy. And
Right.
that's what pussy walking is about. It's about sexual energy that isn't just sex. It's about sexual energy for the creation of your life, for manifestation, for feeling good, for feeling confident. And it's this part of our bodies that we're told to feel ashamed of.
Hmm.
The roots of the word pudenda for the vagina in Latin mean shame. So these are deep,
Oof.
deep roots that
Oof.
teach us to feel ashamed about our bodies. And so pussy walking like Quirkyalone is this big reclamation of like, yeah, there's something good going on here. And we're
Hmm.
going to tap into it and we're going to use it. So yeah, one of my missions in life is to spread pussy walking.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. I just want to go back to the anatomy piece, because when I learned that, I was like, oh, because I grew up like you and like probably most of our listeners thinking that the clitoris was just like a little button at the top, and that was it. And when I started relearning my anatomy, I learned that there were actually like legs or roots coming down from the clitoris. For those of you watching the video, you can see my little demonstration, but for those of you listening, you can envision the clitoral, you said button, but sort of like a spot with kind of with sort of roots coming down from the left and the right that go down inside the vulva underneath the labia. And so we all know that we feel kind of turned on by touch in all different ways. If we do, a lot of people do have, a lot of blocks to feeling that pleasure.
Mhm.
But the point is that there's so much of the tissue with the nerve endings that are so yummy and juicy and turn on the body and ignite that life force energy, and it's not just that one little spot. And yeah, and there's even more. But anyway, I just wanted to go back to that piece because it's interesting too. Like when I was taught the language, it was like clitoral legs. That was the language that I was taught.
Mhm.
And I think,
Oh, legs, interesting.
yeah, I don't know that I would use that language now, but legs and pussy walking, like it makes sense. It's like
Mm.
goes with pussy walking.
Yes,
Um, yeah.
absolutely. It's making me think of that song. I don't know if I get it right now. These legs are made for walking. Is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, set them free.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and you asked me earlier when I was referencing an image that comes up when I hear the word pussy walking, and what I do, the image I have is actually of a very confident woman, very embodied, connected to the body and in her power. Um, that comes from, for me, it doesn't just come from my root chakra or my pussy, but also comes from my belly. So like the first and second chakras, I would say for me.
Mm.
And sort of being that embodied and then walking through the world. It doesn't have to be on stage, but just being connected to myself, being embodied and walking in that way that feels connected and confident and powerful and open, open-hearted
Mm.
also.
Yeah, and when people start to learn pussy walking, it isn't just about the pussy. It's like, it really makes a lot of sense because it's the center of our bodies. And
Right.
so when you bring your awareness and your attention there, it can change the way you touch the ground. It can change the way your
Mm,
legs function. It can, yeah, you can also circulate that energy up the spine, like tantric practices. And that's essentially the pussy breathing practice that I teach. But it is really a whole body empowerment. And there's so much to that because we feel our body, we feel our emotions, and we get so much information through our bodies. And it kind of goes back to what you said about, I can't breathe and I don't know what's going on. And, then it was a journey to realize that was anxiety.
mm,
And that is so much of what I'm hoping to help people develop into, is like this greater connection to their bodies and how that can be empowering. And I don't think it's always obvious immediately, but once you start breaking it down, it makes complete sense. Like, of course, we all know that we get like a twist in our stomach if something doesn't feel right, or a headache. Or I just gave a talk in Cambridge about listening to your body to make decisions in business, and
Nice.
the audience just comes up with great stories. Like, a man who was asked to do an unethical business proposition and he had a headache until he said no,
Mm,
for example, like something like that. It's
yeah,
so clear when you look back on your own life to see what was my body telling me.
right. Yeah, really interesting. And we can even just take a minute right now and do this tiny little exercise that I like to do, which is to ask, we don't have live people in our Zoom room right now, but we can connect with ourselves and anybody listening, and just to ask the question, like, on a scale of 0 to 100%, 100% being fully embodied, and it changes every moment, every day. But to ask yourself, like, how embodied do you feel in this moment? Like, what's your number today? And there's no right and there's no wrong. And like, I've been traveling before this call, this connection with you, and so I'm probably less in my body because of the travel, because it was long and it got late and there's a lot of energies around that, I as an empath, and you know this as well, need to, kind of continue to put down and release. Um, so yeah. And then, so to ask that question is really helpful, because then let's say, like, I'm going to be really vulnerable. Like right now, I'm feeling like 29%, which feels really low. Yesterday, when I checked in, I felt about 70%. And,
Mhm.
you know, probably, I think it was a little lower. Then I kind of, did some movement and I took a hot bath and then I felt more in my body. But I think we leave our bodies. You just, brought this great example of this talk you gave, like including your body in decision making. I think that we have so in our culture disconnected from our bodies. And so we're like living and making decisions and choices, but leaving our body aside and not including our bodies in our decision making. And this little question, little not so little question of like, well, how embodied do I feel in this moment before I make this big decision, whatever it is,
Mm.
or
I
before I
love
choose what I'm going to have for lunch, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant because it's such a simple question. And for me, it makes me think of something very practical, which I also like. We're always kind of going back and forth with how embodied do we feel, and tension is just naturally going to get in our bodies. Like, I talk to people about fear a lot,
Mm,
um, and fear makes us tense, and the society is trying to make us scared, our brains are trying to make us scared. It's just natural. So
right.
I call them emotional hygiene practices that I do, of like
Yes.
journaling and meditation, but it's also like a body emotional hygiene. Like for me, I could say the answer of how embodied do I feel in this moment is higher because I did my dance workout this morning. If
Nice.
I didn't, I would be at 5% because I wake up very creaky and
Mm,
icky.
mhm.
So even like with getting older, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of practices I do to stay embodied, but when I do them, I typically feel more free, more flowing.
Yes, absolutely. Movement, breath, like you said earlier, connecting with your body through the breath, grounding practices, all those things. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Every day. If I
Every,
don't do it, like the number goes way down.
at least once a day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Definitely every day. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick commercial break and come right back. Welcome back to this incredibly juicy conversation. I think this is the juiciest I've had so far in terms of talking about things with a lot of ease and comfort that a lot of people don't feel ease and comfort talking about. And I want to acknowledge that about you and also about myself, that for some reason riding my bicycle at 11 years old to the local library on Long Island, taking out books on sex, riding home with them in my backpack, reading them under my bed with a flashlight or under the covers, like never telling anybody and then riding my bicycle back and dropping them off. I did that. Um, I guess I just came in. I was very uncomfortable and had a lot of shame around my body in those years, but something really inspired me to like learn, figure out like what's going on here with this body.
Mhm.
Um,
I absolutely same. I grew up in Rhode Island, which is a very puritanical place, especially when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, and tons of discomfort. I think I remember also reading a book about sex or multiple as a kid, and it was a very gradual process. It takes a lot of work to become comfortable. So I like the acknowledgement of us for that because like we did a lot to get to this place.
yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so tell us about your upcoming book, Wet. Great title.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work just even in embracing and staying with the title of Wet because I've asked myself many times if the title was too shocking for me to hold, too taboo. Um, so Wet is a memoir that I'm thinking about calling an autobiographical novel as of this past weekend because it's written like a novel and I want people to know they're going to go on an entertaining journey in reading this book,
Mm.
but it's also going to take them through the wet stuff, which people are like expecting porn. It's not porn at all. I mean, actually, there's a lot that I've written about pornography because pornography was very damaging to me as a child because it was part of that incident that happened. Um, but really, it's a book that's about me leaving Silicon Valley, where I was working in my mid 30s, feeling completely cynical, disconnected, hopeless, the feeling that you've gotten to a certain place in your career, so you just got to stay there because that's it. You don't want to make less money, you don't want to step out, and instead I felt this calling from my body based on a trip that I took to Brazil that told me, listen to your body, listen to your body, listen to your body. And that led to years of wandering around South America and exploring sexuality, discovering tango, and not really even knowing, like, what am I doing with my life while everyone else is having kids and buying houses and getting better job titles? I'm like
Yeah.
retraining as a life coach and doing all this sexuality stuff and dancing tango. Well, through writing the book and really understanding all the experiences and choices that I made, I understood that I was actually doing all this stuff to heal
Yeah.
from the past.
Right.
And that is in the end the most important thing I could ever do in my life. It was really in a way understanding that healing for me was number one before any of those other markers of
Yeah.
achievement, like getting married, et cetera. Even though I would like to get married, I did put healing first. So it's a book that is a story of a woman doing all these outside the comfort zone things. I mean, I think when readers read this book, they'll be like, what? You did what? You're diving off a rock in Brazil, and now you're doing this clitoris stroking practice, and what? So there's a lot of fun stuff in Wet, but it's also the story of a winding healing journey, and it's also how I became a coach, and it's a lot of the stuff that I convey to clients about our bodies because it's the story of me deciphering all these messages from my bodies and making choices. Like now I'm going to move to Argentina because I'm listening to my pussy, basically.
Hmm. Wow. Oh, I can't wait to read it. And I have my own version of Wet, so it's very inspiring to,
Oh, that's great. That's my hope that other people can identify their own story of wet.
yeah, absolutely. Yes. I know
So
that
I'm
I,
still working on it. I've been working
yeah.
on it for 13 years. If people
Mhm.
this is a book that will be of interest to trauma survivors because it's like if you're a sexual trauma survivor and you want to get back in your body, this is the story of someone doing that.
Yeah.
And anyone who is like interested in what can my sensuality and sexuality offer me
Mhm.
beyond the obvious, basically.
Yeah.
Um, on my website, there's a page for Wet, and there's a sign up if anyone is interested in being an early reader. It can be so isolating to work on a book for 13 years. So I'm sort of continually trying to find ways to bring people into the creative process for them and for me.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you for mentioning that. Um, yeah, so let's continue with how to connect with you. Of course, in the copy and the text around this interview, there'll be links for people to connect with you. But for those that are listening, how do we find you?
So go to my website, Sasha Cagen, SASHACAGEN.com. A little pop-up will show up about the newsletter. So get on the newsletter. Robyn is a subscriber, so she can attest to the
Oh
experience
yeah,
of
I
the
love it.
newsletter.
Love it.
So there's talk about Quirkyalone, there's talk about Pussywalking, there's talk about, tools to help you become bold, basically, is the way that I describe it. Um, and there are pussy walking videos too to teach people how to pussy walk. So if you go to the page, you can go to pussywalking.com or
Good.
sashacagen.com/pussywalking and sign up, and you'll get pussy walking videos to help you connect with the power of your pussy.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I was hoping you had pussywalking.com because it's easy to remember.
Yeah, I noticed like when I was at that Cambridge event and I was with a group of men who work in tech and they were like, pussy walking. And they were like, I'm like, I don't know if I should be talking about this, but they got very interested and they Googled it and wound up on pussywalking.com.
I bet they did. Oh, that's hilarious. Wonderful, wonderful. And I know once people go there, you've got, like you said, you've got free material. People can, um, opt in to receive that, to connect with you in your newsletter. And I have to say, I mean, you are such a wonderful writer, and that comes from somebody who is also a writer, but in a different, way that you've really embraced it. And your writing and your newsletters, I just find so engaging, and I'm learning all the time. And I love listening to the things you have to say. So I'm encouraging all of our listeners to connect with you in that way and more.
Thank you, Robyn. I really respect that from you. And I said this in the off air. It's just so fun to talk to you because you're so I don't know, deep and intuitive about all these topics.
Yeah,
So I value your respect highly.
thank you. Anything you want to leave our listeners with? Any, I don't know, any inspiration or a mantra that they can take with them or
Inspiration or mantra. You have everything you need inside of you,
there you go.
especially tap into it. And I love hearing about people's experiences. Like also, if you sign up for my website, you can get a guide how to make decisions by consulting your pussy. And then afterwards, I send out a Google form to tell me your experiences with that. So I'm always collecting research. I'm very interested in people's experiences.
Yeah.
So engage and tell me how it goes with you.
Awesome. 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 I'll be writing you later after I do my pussy walking practice.
Good.
Thank you so much, Sasha. This has been so much fun,
Me too.
and encouraging our listeners to honestly, when I do these radio shows, I just encourage people to download and listen again because so much we said so many things in such a short amount of time, and simple enough to download and replay and listen to the different pieces, and there was education and inspiration and really powerful stories in this episode. So I'll just encourage everybody to do that. And thank you so much, Sasha. And to our listeners and my listeners, I'll see you next week, Thursday, 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. live on Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Have a beautiful day.